I'm Addison. Sitting in a small cafe on the outskirts of Portland, I'm staring out at the rain-splattered window. My phone lies screen down beside my half-empty mug, and I haven't bothered to unlock it all morning. Outside, the city goes about its business, oblivious to the storm that's raging inside me. It's hard to believe that just a few weeks ago, my life was turned upside down by a single phone call. The phone rang just after 7 a.m. That early hour is usually a harbinger of bad news, and I should have let it go to voicemail. But old habits die hard, and I found myself reaching for the landline. I only kept it for emergencies and spam calls, but there was a part of me that still believed some news was meant to be delivered over wires. Addison, my mother, Margaret, said. Her voice was cold and formal, even though she was about to deliver a devastating blow. Your sister, Lily, is getting married, and we've decided it's going to be a very intimate affair. You're not invited. I felt the air leave my lungs. What? I'm her sister. I'm family. I stammered. Just close family, dear, she replied, her tone unyielding. It's going to be a small, private ceremony. And with that, she hung up. I stood there in the kitchen, the phone receiver still in my hand, as the reality of what had just happened sank in. I was being excluded from my own sister's wedding, like an unwanted shadow. I'd always known that Lily was the golden child in our family. She was 4 years younger than me, but she'd always been the center of attention. She was beautiful, charming, and had a way of getting what she wanted. Growing up, she'd always gotten away with things that I never could. If I made a mistake, I'd be punished, but if Lily did the same thing, she'd be forgiven with a smile. At family gatherings, I was always the one doing the work, while Lily was the one being showered with attention. I'd be in the kitchen, cooking and cleaning, while she'd be out socializing, looking beautiful. I never really minded, though. I loved my sister, and I was happy to do whatever I could to help her. But this was different. This was a blatant rejection, and it hurt more than I could have ever imagined. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, and I couldn't catch my breath. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the wall, where I used to hang the family calendar. It was a reminder of all the birthdays and holidays that we'd celebrated together, and it felt like a lifetime ago. The kettle on the stove began to whistle, but I didn't move. I just sat there, lost in my thoughts, as the coffee grew cold. A few hours later, I received a text message from Lily. It was a group message to our family chat, which we called the Harrison clan. She was confirming the guest list and letting everyone know that it was going to be a very exclusive event. My name wasn't on the list. Not even a mention. It was as if I'd ceased to exist. I stared at the message for what felt like hours, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I'd always been there for Lily, through thick and thin, and this is how she repaid me? I felt betrayed, angry, and hurt, all at the same time. I thought about calling her, or texting her back, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. She'd made her decision, and there was nothing I could do to change it. Instead, I decided to do something drastic. I booked a one-way ticket to Portland, a city I'd never been to before. It was a place where no one knew me, and I could start over. I packed a few clothes and my sketchbook, and I left my apartment without looking back. I didn't say goodbye to anyone, and I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just needed to get away, to escape the pain and the heartbreak. The flight to Portland was long and uncomfortable, but I didn't care. I was too lost in my thoughts to notice. When I arrived, it was raining, and the city seemed to be shrouded in a thick fog. It was a far cry from the sunny skies and warm temperatures of Chicago, but it felt right. It felt like a new beginning. I found a small guest house above a bookstore called Literary Haven, and I checked in. The innkeeper, a kind old woman named Hazel, showed me to my room and gave me a key. Room 4 can be a bit drafty, she said. You might want to keep the window closed at night. I thanked her and settled into my room. It was small and cozy, with a twin bed, a desk, and a window that looked out onto the street. I sat down on the bed and looked around, taking in my surroundings. This was going to be my new home, at least for the time being. Over the next few days, I explored the city, walking along the rain-slicked streets and taking in the sights and sounds. I visited the local cafes and bookstores, and I met some interesting people. I even started to draw again, something I hadn't done in years. It was a way for me to express my emotions, to let go of the pain and the anger. One day, while I was walking through the park, I met a woman named Clara. She was sitting on a bench, reading a book, and she looked up when she saw me. She had long, curly brown hair and bright green eyes, and she was wearing a comfortable-looking sweater and jeans. "Hi," she said, smiling. "Mind if I sit here?" I shook my head, and she sat down beside me. We started to talk, and I found myself opening up to her. I told her about what had happened with my family, and how I was feeling. She listened intently, offering me words of comfort and support. "You don't deserve to be treated like that," she said. "You're a wonderful person, and you deserve to be happy." Her words made me feel better, and I realized that I wasn't alone. There were people out there who cared about me, who understood what I was going through. A few days later, Clara invited me to a dinner party at her house. It was a small gathering of friends, and I was a little nervous at first. But when I walked into her house, I was immediately greeted with warmth and kindness. Everyone was friendly and welcoming, and I felt like I belonged. We sat around the table, sharing stories and laughter, and I realized that this was what family was supposed to be like. It wasn't about blood relations or obligations. It was about love, support, and acceptance. Over the next few weeks, I started to get messages from my family. They were mostly from my mother, asking me to come home and to help them with the wedding. They needed me to co-sign a loan for the venue, because my credit score was the best in the family. I ignored their messages at first, but they kept coming. They grew more desperate and manipulative, trying to guilt me into coming back. My mother even told me that I was being selfish, that I was letting my family down. But I wasn't going to let them do this to me again. I'd learned my lesson. I was done being the one who was always there to pick up the pieces, the one who was always taken for granted. I was going to put myself first, for once. A few days later, I received a message from Lily. It was a screenshot of an Instagram story, announcing that the wedding had been postponed indefinitely due to unforeseen circumstances. I felt a mix of emotions. On the one hand, I was relieved. I didn't have to deal with the stress and the drama of the wedding anymore. On the other hand, I felt sad. I knew that this was a difficult time for my sister, and I wished that I could have been there for her. A few days later, I decided to fly back to Chicago to tie up some loose ends. I wasn't sure if I was going to stay, but I needed to face my family and to tell them how I felt. When I arrived at my apartment, I found a note on the door. It was from my mother, asking me to call her. I ignored it and went inside. I unpacked my bags and sat down on the couch, feeling exhausted. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door. I opened it, and there stood my mother, my father, and Lily. They looked tired and defeated, and I could tell that they had been through a lot. "Addison," my mother said, her voice soft. "We need to talk." I stepped aside and let them in. We sat down on the couch, and there was an awkward silence. "I'm sorry," Lily said, finally. "I was wrong. I should have never excluded you from my wedding. I was being selfish and stupid." I looked at her, and I could see the pain and the regret in her eyes. I knew that she was sincere, and I felt my heart soften. "I forgive you," I said. "But things are going to have to change. I can't keep being the one who is always there to pick up the pieces, the one who is always taken for granted." My mother nodded. "You're right, Addison. We've been taking you for granted. We're going to do better." I looked at them, and I knew that they meant what they said. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, and I realized that maybe there was hope for our family after all. A few days later, I decided to stay in Chicago. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that I was ready to face it. I was ready to build a new relationship with my family, one based on love, respect, and equality. As I sat on the couch, looking out at the city, I felt a sense of peace. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready to take on the challenge. I was ready to be happy, finally.